Leave. Who?
Religious people.
Religious people.
Otherwise, I wouldn't bring it.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Everybody, if you don't have a chumash, please get one. The reason why I gave out 2 Parsha facts is because this week we're doing a combination of 2 portions. It's Matos and Masey. Matos and Masey, which are the final 2 portions in Chumash Bamidbar, the final portions in the book of Deuteronomy. Does everyone have a chumash? At least those that are here? Take them in the back shelves. We're not doing Hebrew now. Go ahead. I can tell. Yes.
2 Matos. I need a Masey.
You need a Masey? Does everyone have Matos and Masey and the Parsha fact that they've given out 2 of the same? I don't think so. No, you need both.
Oh, no, I already have one. You gave me 2 of these.
I'm very confused.
You gave me 2 Matos.
I got it.
So I just needed it.
Okay. So let me just do one technical thing first in the Chumash. Take a look. On page 902 in your handy Chumash. Everyone see it? 902? Yes, everyone with me? Hello?
Yeah.
Great, I thought you'd hear English as a second language and you weren't responding.
Yeah.
Okay. On the in the margin on the lower right, you see a big Lamed Aleph. Underneath that, it says the word Sheni. Sheni means the second.
On the right.
On the right side, the margin on the bottom. See Lamed Aleph?
It's like in the middle of the page.
Sheni. That means the second aliyah. That meant if we were reading Matos by itself, that would be the end of the second aliyah. You know what I mean when I say aliyah? Second person called up to the Torah. Okay? Normally, that's where we would stop. The person who was called up for the first aliyah would say the concluding blessing, and then another person would be called up and he would make the beginning blessing for the second section. Everybody with me? If you don't understand what I'm saying, please tell me. I'm giving you information, but I don't want to, don't be embarrassed to ask. If you don't understand, it's... No, that's Lamed, Perik Lamed. That means chapter 31. That's not relevant. I'm just using that for you to see that. 31, that's chapter 31. That's not relevant. I'm just saying, focus on the Sheni. Second. Now turn to the next page. In the margin. You'll see it says in the margin, take a chumash, Yitzchak, page 904. In the margin, it says Shalishi. That relates, by the way, for those that we have for Shalosh. Shalishi means the third aliyah, which means the second person finishes the concluding blessing, another person is called up, and they do the beginning reading for the third person. In brackets, it says Sheni. Does everyone see that? Yeah. And the reason why it's doing that is because when we combine 2 portions, like this week, where we're doing Matos and Masey, we don't have 14 aliyahs. We don't call up 14 people. We call up 7, and we just make the aliyahs longer. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? Am I being clear? So what happens now is, this week, the second aliyah is going to end here by verse Yud Gimel, the 13th verse, and that'll be where Sheni is. Alvaro, is the understanding what I'm saying? You're not getting it.
Yes, I understand the point. That's when you're combining when there's more than one.
When more than one portion, so the person being called up gets a bigger piece of the cake. Okay?
What is the cake?
This is the cake you can have.
there's how many aliyahs?
7 plus 1.
7, okay, so they're gonna be doing all like. Like 16, but the bigger portion for each one.
It's not gonna be 16, it's gonna be 7 aliyahs, just each one is gonna be bigger because it's combining 2 portions together.
But is it like this every year, these 2 portions?
No, it depends on the parsha. We passed many parshas that sometimes are together, but this year we're not because it was a leap year. So it depends on the year. Yes, it's I don't recall it being alone, but it's possible, I guess. I don't recall it being alone. But so here you go, shlishi, and then in brackets it's sheni. Okay?
How do you say in English, aliyah?
There's no one word being called up to the Torah. Yes.
So 7, each individual gets an extra portion?
No.
No? Okay.
If I had my board here, I would show you. What I'm saying is as follows. Okay. Look up here for a second. Imagine this was one portion, so it's divided up into 7 pieces, right? Here's 2 portions. So then it's also divided up into 7 pieces, just the pieces are bigger.
I understand, I'm confused that like how it's different every year and how the Torah, how it's divided differently.
Well, in the course of a year, we have to finish the entire Torah. So however that works out, depending on if it's a leap year and when the holidays fall out on a Shabbos or not, that's how we combine different portions to make sure that we finish the entire Torah within the course of a year.
This is not changing from year to year, right? This is.
What's not changing?
The Torah.
The Chumash isn't changing. The question is what we're reading on Shabbos. Are we reading 1 portion or 2 portions? So this week, we haven't had that a whole year so far. This week, we are combining 2 portions together, Matos and Masey. And each portion is going to be bigger for the 7 people called up. Yeah.
So it essentially says you're not each person is getting double, I mean, 2.
They're not getting 2 aliyahs, they're getting an extra.
But they're not getting, because it's extended, what do you think it do? But how's it big?
It's bigger. Imagine you have a small cake, so you cut up into smaller pieces. You have a bigger cake, you cut it up into bigger pieces. You're still dividing it 7 pieces, but it's all dependent on the size of the cake. So the size of the Parsha cake is larger this week, so everyone's getting a little bit bigger. Okay, take a look at page 906. Is Revi'i, the 4th aliyah, when it would be read by itself. 906 in the margin, and 908 in the margin is Chamishi. That's the 5th aliyah when it's read by itself. 910 is Shishi, the 6th aliyah when it's read by itself, and in brackets it says Shalishi. So the 2nd aliyah is going to be very long. It gets all the way till here. Everyone with me?
Yeah.
Keep on going to 912, and there goes Shavi'i, the 7th aliyah, if Matos is read by itself, and then we have Revi'i, it's the 4th aliyah this week when it's combined. And the 4th aliyah continues and goes into next week, the next Parsha, go to 918. That's Sheni, if Masey was read by itself, and the 4th aliyah goes all the way when it's combined to the bottom of 920. And there it says Shalishi, the 3rd aliyah, when it would be by itself, but Chamishi, the 5th aliyah, if it's read together.
That's. It's built into the Torah, it's what's in parentheses, it's combined.
That's correct. Go to page 926. On the top there, it says Revi'i, that's the fourth aliyah if Masey was read by itself, and it is Shishi, the sixth aliyah, if it's read together. Kamishi is the fifth aliyah in the middle of 926 if Masey was read by itself. 928 is Shishi, it's the sixth aliyah if it's read by itself. Shavi if it's combined, the seventh aliyah if it's combined. Okay. All right. So we did a lot of instruction. Now let's talk about what it's about. So I wanted to apologize. Steve is not here, unfortunately. I want to apologize to Steve because he felt I apologize for cutting him off last week. We were talking about the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. We were talking about Hamas, and I was focusing on one point, which was the justification, rationalization that people use in making choices, and even Hamas did that. But what the obvious thing that I didn't say, but I think is important, is that they are very wicked, and it's very clear that it's evil. Now, of course, in America and around the world, everyone's saying, no, it's complicated. It's not complicated. It's very black and white. But I was focusing on one point, and he was trying to say the other point, and I apologize to him. Please, Murray, pass it on to him that I apologize to him. Maybe play the recording, but let him know I apologize. Because we have to understand that there is evil in the world. I was just focusing on the rationalization that people use to do things wrong, that people want. So there's an article that I found that's relevant to this. And we look at people that are wicked as being really violent. They're really uneducated, but that's not exactly the truth. Of 157 non-Jewish philosophy professors in Germany, 37% joined the Nazi Party. In the infamous Wannsee conference, where the Nazis planned the final solution to murder the entire Jewish people, 15 participants, 8 of them had academic doctorates. My father, this is the one who wrote this article of blessed memory, told me that anti-Semitic students in pre-war Poland would try to prevent Jewish students from entering the universities that take exams. And in the US, in the 21st century, Jewish professors and students have been banned from campuses, blocked from classes and study sessions, intimidated and attacked in the hallowed halls and quads of Columbia, Yale, UCLA, and Harvard, etc. So the author writes, am I upset by this? Yes. Am I angered by this? Yes. Am I surprised by this? No, because I'm a student of history. I know that people can be well-educated, technologically advanced, and malevolent. People can be cultured and utterly evil, can be philosophers, physicists, and Nazis all simultaneously.
Education is not the end all.
No?
No, that's really one of the great lessons of Nazi Germany is.
Yeah, and we're living it again, unfortunately. Here's his last line is, I'm not reading the whole article, but I'll just read one part of it. I'm not arrogant enough to tell anyone the lesson of the Holocaust, or even to think that I can have an understanding of the event. However, there's no one idea that current events have made me think of in connection to the Holocaust Memorial Day. Don't be fooled by superficial veneers of civilization. Education is not the same as ethics. Sophisticated civilizations are not always civilized. And if there's no fear of God in any place, then people are capable of anything. And that's a very powerful idea. If there's no fear of God in any place, then people are capable of anything. Yes, sir.
Why do they did join the Nazi, but they did not join, and might be sent to the Holocaust?
No, the Germans weren't required. The German professors were not required to join, because some did, some didn't. It doesn't mean they were pro-Jews. They just didn't have to join the party. All right.
Rabbi, may I ask a question?
Please go right ahead.
It seems as though the means are different, but the goal is the same, destruction. So, is there a root cause?
A root cause of anti-Semitism?
Yes.
Oh, that's a whole class now to itself, but I'll give you the simple one. The simplest one that the Talmud tells us. Mount Sinai is called Mount Sinai because the place where it was Sinai. The Talmud says there's a play on words there. Sinai is related, spelled differently, but sounds the same to the word sinah, hatred. We got the Torah, and that brought hatred to the world of us because we were given this beautiful gift, and or Hitler put it differently. There's two things that he wants to eradicate that the Jews brought to the world. One is a blemish on the body, and one is a blemish on the soul. The blemish on the body, he said, was circumcision, and the blemish on the soul is conscience. Imagine that. He wants to eradicate the concept of a conscience. That's what Sinai is. Sinai is what is objectively right and wrong, not based upon our opinion, but based upon what God says. So that's in a nutshell the source of anti-Semitism. So there's an anger, there's a jealousy that we have what we have, and we try to live by it. And again, it's a longer discussion because there are other factors as well, but the reminder for us is important, that we have to know who we are. All right. So Parshas Matos talks about the Parsha, beginning of the Parsha deals with vows, promises, and swearing. I'm not talking about curse words. I don't mean that kind of swearing. It's promises and swearing that I mean, there's a guy that kind of says, "Oh, I promise." Don't promise. Don't promise. Your words are important. We're supposed to not make a promise. Vows, words are very powerful. They're not, sticks and stones will break my bones, words will never harm me. That's not true. And we have to be aware of that. Words have tremendous potency. First of all, don't make a vow if you can't keep it. You have to be certain that you can keep it. He promises he's going to stop smoking. Great. Vaping. Great. Don't promise unless you know for sure that you're going to be able to keep it. Don't do it for trivial matters. If you can keep it, then you can do it for three reasons. One, to stop a bad habit. Two is to do a mitzvah, and also in times of distress. And not keeping vows is sin and is a desecration of God's name. Hashem wants us to keep our words and gave us ways of nullifying them, especially if we didn't think of the consequences of those vows. And what you can do is you can go to either a scholar or you can go to 3 lay people and get it nullified, the vows, to get the vows nullified.
Just call nidre.
Kol nidre, we're going to get to that. Kol nidre is a prayer that we say on Yom Kippur night, and that is a type of nullification of vows. It's more of a prayer about the nullification. We actually tried to nullify vows earlier, after before Rosh Hashanah, but there is such an idea. The Parsha focuses about certain types of vows that, depending on the age of the young lady, a father could nullify, a husband could nullify if it affects him on that day that he hears about it. But it's very important to understand the importance of keeping our commitments. That's a very important idea. When we say something, even if it's not a vow, it's important to keep our commitment. I had a story many years ago I had a doctor that was working here at Cedars, and the dating wasn't going for him for some reason, and he decided he's going to go to New York, and he's going to look for another job in a hospital in New York, and he got a very nice offer, and Cedars knew about it, and they didn't, offer a counter offer, and he dealt, and he was an accomplished physician, and he got a good position in a hospital in New York, and they wanted to know who he wanted to take along with them, to bring people along that they would hire, and he gave them a list, and they started talking to the people about it, and then he hadn't signed the contract with them yet, but Cedars had the other hospital had taken him seriously and started negotiating with the people that he had wanted to bring on with him. And then Cedars woke up and said, "Oh, we don't want you to go. We're going to give you a better offer. Stay here." And he called me and said, "What should I do?" So I said, by Jewish law, since you didn't sign a contract, you probably are not obligated to go to New York. But since you gave your word and they took you seriously there, because they were even in negotiations with physicians you wanted to bring on, I would suggest that you go. And he gets frustrated. I don't get it. The doctors with the money, they tell me, take the bigger offer. The rabbi doesn't have that much money, says I should go, I should keep my word and go there. I said, yeah, that's why I don't get paid the big bucks, So he ended up following my suggestion, and he got a position there in New York with the hospital that he dealt with, and he found a young lady from California that also moved to New York for marriage purposes, and that's who he married. So it was a sweet end to the story. But keeping our word is a very, very important idea. Now, it is important to realize that the negative power of our words is very strong. Speaking badly about other people, bullying, and there's a positive power of our words, prayer and words of encouragement, that one can never know. One of the most powerful Holocaust stories is that a man once saw a fellow rummaging through the garbage in the concentration camp, and he was starving, and he was looking for something, potato peels, anything to eat. And I walked by, and he said, "You have anything to eat? Anything to eat?" But I didn't have any food to nourish a starving body, and I didn't have access to it. I said, "I'm sorry, I don't." He begged me, "Give me something, give me something." So I went over to him and I told him, "I don't have any food, but I do have something. I love you. I love you. I love you." I put my arm around him and I told him, "Chabib, I love you." He didn't know him, but he was a fellow Jew that was suffering there. And they cried together, and he didn't give him any food, but at the same time, it gave him a little bit of an injection. It gave him some strength. And the man said, if there was one act that served as a merit for me to survive the war, he thinks that was that merit, that job, that thing that he did. Another sweet story on a positive note was there was a teacher who was not religious that taught in an Orthodox school, day school, and she saw that some high school girls were talking and said, "What's going on?" She said, "Someone spoke Lashon Hara about somebody else. Someone spoke bad about somebody else." And, we're talking about it. She says, "Well, everybody does that." It says, "Yeah, but it's not the right thing to do." And she was very impressed that this was a topic of discussion, and it had an impact on her. And she decided that she was going to send her child to a religious school because that became an issue. But again, as I said, ideally we try to avoid it, but it can be nullified under certain circumstances. Now, what's interesting to note is a few things. First of all, in English, we say the vow of marriage. It's not really a vow. It's not a promise. It's really a contractual agreement. So you can't nullify the vow of marriage by going to a court. It actually needs a whole procedure of a particular get. Now, what I mentioned was about you can't make a vow against the Torah. So so a person makes a vow, he's only going to eat non-kosher, the vow is invalid. He doesn't have to keep the vow because it's against the Torah. Similarly, if a person, even in their will, let's say, leaves in their will that they want to be cremated, we don't listen to that, even though that was their will, because it's against the Torah. A person should have proper Jewish burial, and it's a longer discussion. I do recommend, and it's a longer discussion, speaking to family members about this, because this is a very, very heavy and touchy subject. Causes a lot of stress for people. I'm sorry?
Expensive.
It's a little bit more expensive, true, but that's not the issue. People will help pay for it if need be, but it's really important to realize that that's not the way to go. I had a story several years ago. I was very moved by it. I got a call from a woman who I had never met, and she asked me. She doesn't want to bother her family. She wants to just be cremated. And I said no, and I talked to her about it. I even sent her a book about it. It's a nice book by Ron Kornbluth, I think, about why not to cremate. And I sent her about it, and she said she's very ill, and she knows she's going to go in a few months. And I just encouraged her and said, have a proper Jewish burial. And several months later, I got a call from her daughter. She said my mom had passed, and she bought a plot in the Jewish cemetery, and she asked me if I would officiate at the funeral, which I was very touched and moved by it. And she had a kosher funeral, which is very big. So again, the vows have to fit into what the Torah says. A person can't say I made a promise, so I have to keep it. Not necessarily. Also in the Parsha is, now it's interesting, by the way, it used to be, I don't think it's that way anymore, but it used to be in the diamond industry that when people would want to finish a deal, they would shake on it and say mazel ubracha, which means, badly translated, would be luck and blessing. And that's how the deal was sealed. You don't have to have a contract. You were now obligated to pay for the purchase you did just by shaking hands and saying mazel ubracha. That became a legal commitment. As we mentioned last time, God told Moshe to take revenge against the Midianites for enticing the men to idolatry and for sexual immorality. And as we mentioned, that it's worse to hurt somebody physically. It's worse to hurt them spiritually than it is to hurt them physically. So what's going to happen is, that's what Pinchas is the one who's going to lead them, because we tell the person, you start a mitzvah, finish it. You're the one who killed the Midianite princess. Then you go and finish the battle and fight against them. Why did Moshe do it? He had to recognize the good that the Midianites had done for him, because remember when he ran away from Egypt, he hung out in Midian. So it wouldn't be appropriate for him to lead the battle, and Pinchas, for Pinchas, it would be okay.
Is it Moshe's father-in-law and wife, Midianite?
Yes, that's correct. That's exactly where he met them when he was there. Yeah,
It might be have to do with last week's Parsha a little bit, but so Pinchas killed the prince that was, doing, in the public place. whatever.
Yeah.
And then why didn't Moshe, somebody said because his wife was Midianite, so maybe he thought he cannot go out and.
no, he could have, but he just was taken aback by the question he was asked. Hey, can you marry a Midianite? And the answer was, it was before the Torah was given, she converted. But he was taken aback by the brazenness of Zimri. So he just,
He didn't know what to do.
he was like sort of shell-shocked a little bit, yeah. And that's why Pinchas said, what do you mean? We have to stand up, and he said, go for it. So Moshe told him, go for it. Okay, so let's take a look at the verse, chapter 31. Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, take vengeance for the children of Israel against the Midianites. Afterwards, you will be gathered onto your people. What does that mean? Moshe is going to die. Now imagine if Hashem tells somebody, do X, and then afterwards you're going to die. Guess what you would do? Take plenty of time to plan before you take the attack. Because Hashem's not going to die afterwards. I'm not in a rush. But that's not what Moshe did. Moshe right away went to plan to take war, to take the war. And he right away organized 1,000 people from each tribe to go into battle, with Pinchas leading them. It's very amazing.
What page was that on?
That was on the battle of 902 and 904, or 901 and 903. Now I'd like you to, what does gathered onto his people mean?
Is this a euphemism or a poetic way of describing death?
Yes and no, as we're going to see in a moment. I want you to keep the place here at 904. I want you to go all the way back to page 121, verse 8. All the way back, 121, verse 8. Page 121, verse 8. Let's see what it says. And Avrohom expired and died at a good old age, mature and content, and he was gathered to his people. What's the problem with that verse?
He already died.
He died, so he
And then
can't.
he's gathered to the people.
Yeah, so what does that mean, gathered to the people, if he died already? So this is a text proof for the concept of a soul. Gathered to his people means that the soul goes back to the other souls in heaven. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? And this is a powerful idea. Body goes into the ground, but the soul returns to the other souls. And this is really old news for us, because we have the concept of, some of you may have heard of out-of-body experiences, where people find out, about when they were sick, their body left their body and they saw things and heard things that they weren't. I mean, there's a lot of stories we could talk about. It's a lot, but there's a lot of ideas of this idea. I had somebody who used to come to class that she said that her grandson couldn't understand the concept of a grandmother. What he said was, I don't understand. He told his mother, you're my mother, and grandma is your mother? Like, how does that work? And they drew him a chart and they said, when mommy was little, she was grandma's. And then he said something very surprising. He said, grandma was my mom for a little bit. You know what that meant? And found out that the mother had a child that died at age 2. The grandmother, excuse me, had a child that had died at age 2. And this little boy somehow knew about this from himself. Pretty wild stuff, you know. I've just read another recent article that is fascinating about a little kid who had a play friend, an imaginary friend. That's who the mother thought talking about, but she was actually talking about herself. And she was saying, I'm really sad because, and she had a name for the child, you know, the bad people took my mom and dad away. And I'm afraid a tank's going to come. And she had connections to the Holocaust that the parents had no idea. They weren't Jewish. They didn't expose her to anything related to that. It just was like.
So how does the Jewish soul go into, okay, it's a different story.
How does a Jewish soul get into a non-Jewish kid's house? That I don't know. I'm not in charge of that department, thank God. So, I don't know. But the bottom line was that, so this concept of reincarnation is something that's part of Judaism, and it's a story of the soul. There was a story of a woman who was seeing clips of different religions in a college class, and one of the clips was somebody praying by the Western Wall, and she was very attached to it. Said, wow, that moved me so much. And she came home and told her parents, I don't know what that is, but it moved me a lot. And the woman found out that she wasn't, the parents, she thought were not Jewish, but actually her mother was. She was Jewish. And she connected to the symbol of somebody studying, praying at the Western Wall as something relating to her. And that started her journey to become religious herself. So, again, there's a lot more to discuss about it. This is very, very, very powerful ideas. The concept of a soul is something that is really amazing. I had a woman years ago who had a very nice position working for a very famous woman comedian, and her mother got very sick, and her mother was in the hospital, and before her death, her mother said, oh, look who came to visit. And the daughter looks around, there's nobody in the room. Says, yeah, grandma came and grandpa, and look, oh, it's so nice. There's nobody here, Mom. No, they came to take me. And before she passed away, the souls of her relatives that had passed had come to take her. And she said, I just realized that this world is not all there is. There's another world, there's a world of souls. And that prompted her on her journey to get involved in Judaism. And thank God she did many, many great things. And she relatively recently got married in Tzfat. Yes.
My parents' mother is doing that right now.
She's doing what now?
Your son passed away 2 years ago.
Her son passed away?
2 years ago. She said, I'm talking to him right now.
Okay. That look, I can't tell you what it is, but it might be that the soul is coming to visit. That's a rarity, but it can be. I don't know. All right. So Moshe is told that he's going to die after the Midianites. They fight against the Midianites, but Moshe doesn't avoid it. I would have done an environmental impact study and see what we can discuss, tactics, and go shopping. But Moshe, his job was to do what Hashem says. That was his life's mission. And the Jews were hesitant too. But Moshe said, no, we got to do this. And they had people who were praying for the soldiers. Because it's not just the physical things that make the wars win. It has to be a spiritual thing that counts. In Gaza in 1914, in Tel Aviv, on a building, they put a huge sign in the flight path of the Israeli jets. Big letters, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, here is our God is one, to encourage the fighters. I know one boy who sent cookies to the soldiers in Gaza then in 2014, and he had his name there, and the boy wrote a note. Please make a blessing on the cookie before you eat it. And the soldier called him because he had his number on the paper that came with it, and he told him, "I appreciate the cake," and the boy says, We're praying for you, and this is a Hasidic boy from the middle of Israel, and the soldier says, we need your prayers. You keep on praying, and we'll do the fighting. So it's a combination here. That's important. Again, as I mentioned, Moshe does not lead them into battle because he had Hakaras Hatov. He recognized the good the Midianites did for him. Interestingly enough, the Nesiim, the princes, were not told to lead each tribe, even though 1,000 from each tribe was 12,000 soldiers in total. The princes were not told to lead. Why not? Because the prince of Shimon was killed by Pinchas. So if he told the princes to lead, guess who would have been terribly embarrassed? The tribe of Shimon, because their prince had been involved and Pinchas had killed him. So not to embarrass them, he sent them. The oral tradition tells us that they took along an ark to counteract any possible black magic that he would do. The importance of not embarrassing somebody is really amazing. I'll give you one example of that. There was a man who was very wealthy who had very simple furniture. And they asked him, well, you can afford something nicer. Why do you have this? He says, well, when I first married, my home was decorated very luxuriously. But there was a thick carpet and fancy furniture in every room. One day, a poor man came in to ask for charity, and his muddy shoes dirtied the carpet. Someone in the house yelled at him, and the poor man was extremely embarrassed. Rather than run the risk of someone being embarrassed, I got rid of all the fancy carpets and furnishings so that no one should ever be embarrassed to come into my home and make a mess. Very, very beautiful, very, very beautiful idea. Miraculously, no Jews were killed. And Bilam got killed. Bilam, the one whose idea it was.
So they were afraid of the black magic from the Midianites?
Yeah, from Bilam, maybe he would do something. So Bilam was killed by the sword because he was trying to counteract the Jews with the speech. So, you're going to use our method? We're going to use your method to get you. And that's how Bilam was killed by the sword.
Rabbi, do
Yes.
you find it interesting that he was killed by the sword when he threatened his donkey with the sword?
When he what?
He threatened his donkey with the sword. And then he
Well,
was
it
killed
wasn't
with the
because
sword.
of threatening the donkey. It was because he didn't he was trying to use the Jewish people's power of speech. So Hashem made sure, Rashi teaches us, that he was killed with the power of Esav, which he was a descendant of the sword, and that's how he was killed.
But he was the descendant of Esau?
Not son, descendant. Descendant of. Okay. And what happens is the soldiers brought back spoils of war, including some women. And Moshe got angry at them. Why are you bringing the women for? The women were the cause of the problem. You shouldn't have brought them. And what's interesting to note is Moshe right? Ladies and gentlemen, that's a question.
Yeah.
Was Moshe right? Sure, he was right. Let me just turn the air on for a second, as people are fanning themselves. If the ladies are fanning themselves, that means it's really hot. Hold on a second. Ask them why they're not again.
Okay.
Okay, so Rabbi Lapian, who I talked about on Shabbos, a very special person, whenever he had to chastise his students or children, would sometimes wait a week or two before he did, because he didn't want to do it out of anger. I can't say I did that with my kids. It's pretty amazing, but he didn't want to do it out of anger. He wanted to do what was really appropriate for the time. I remember I got a phone call from a neighbor of mine, blessed memory, many years ago, and he said, "Oh, you made my day." I said, "Oh, how come?" He says, "Because I heard you screaming at your kids." Thank you very much. And I called my wife to the window and said, hey, you see Czapnik, who teaches kids, and he's very good with kids, and he got upset at his kids too. I said, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm glad I made your day. So whenever I give a parenting class, I start off with that example to say, we're all humans and we make mistakes, and it's normal stuff, but there's ways of doing things better rather than worse. But in any event, so the Torah has very high standards, and Moshe is taken to task because he got angry and he forgot a law because of it. So and Jews are not perfect. That's an important idea. Jews are not perfect, but Judaism is here to perfect us, and there's no guarantees and no righteous pills. The only thing that's guaranteed is death and taxes. Those are the only two things that are guaranteed. Nothing else is. But we have to work on ourselves. We all have weaknesses and temptations that we have to work on to put ourselves in a better position. And interesting enough that the soldiers shared the wealth, the booty, the things that they had, they shared with the people who prayed for them, because they realized that they weren't doing it on their own. Also mentioned in the Parsha are the laws of kashering, to make something kosher that wasn't because they got vessels from the place that had non-kosher food in it. How do you make it kosher? So that's a whole longer discussion, but I depends on what it's made out of, and just it has to be cleaned, and it has to be not used for 24 hours. And depending on how the hot item got into it, that's how you kosher it. If you use the flame, then you need a flame. If it's just heat, then you can put it in a pot of hot water, boiling water. So again, that's a longer discussion. But now here's an interesting discussion. They're about to enter the land of Israel, and on page 911. The tribe of Reuben and Gad had a request.
What number is it?
Page 911.
And which verse again?
Let me find the verse for you. Okay, take a look at chapter 32, verse 1. The children of Reuben and the children of Gad had an abundant livestock, very great. They saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, and behold, it was a place for livestock. Children of Gad and children of Reuben came and said to Moshe and to Elazar the Kohen and to the leaders of the assembly, saying, verse 4, the land that Hashem smote before the assembly of Israel, it's a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. 5, if we have fine figures, let this land be for your servants as a heritage. Do not bring us across to the Jordan. So you hear what they're asking? What are they asking?
He doesn't want
They don't want to cross into the land of Israel because they see that the land is very fertile for the livestock. And Moshe chastises them and says, shall your brothers go out to battle while you settle here? Why do you dissuade the heart of the children of Israel from crossing the land of Israel that Hashem had given them? He chastises them. And he gives them a long speech about it. Why don't they interrupt him?
because he's not the right.
Not respect.
One of the reasons is a very important idea, which is not, people don't feel comfortable with this idea, but it's very important. Today, everybody wants to have positive only. I only want to hear nice things. American students, by the way, have the highest self-esteem with the lowest self-test scores. Okay, because everyone has to feel good. If you play in a league and you came in last place, you get an award for participating. Because God forbid someone's self-esteem shouldn't be damaged. But somebody who wants to grow wants to hear, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? That's the importance of having an honest mentor, to having a rabbi or a rebbitzin, somebody who will tell you the truth. Not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. And many people are very uncomfortable with that. And I will tell you, I have many former students, when I said something that they didn't like, they shopped around, found somebody else who would tell them what they did like. That's life. And that's an important idea, to realize that if you want to really grow, you have to have somebody who's going to be straight with you about what you can do better. And that's an important idea. As someone said, a rabbi who everybody likes is not doing his job. Because the person has to be willing to say something to let them know what they can do better. So now, what do they say? Finally, they answer him, and they said, he gives them a whole speech, and they say, no, pens for the flock shall we build here for our livestock, and cities for our small children, and we shall arm ourselves swiftly, and we will join the battle, and shall not return home until the children of Israel will be inherited, Israel will be inherited. So in other words, they're saying, no, we're just going to leave the animals and the kids here, and we're going to join you to fight in the land of Israel. We're not backing out of our responsibility to do that. Now compare what they said, verse 16, with verse 24. I'll read it to you for those who don't have it. Pens, they said, pens for the flock shall we build here for our livestock, and cities for our small children. And Moshe says, if you're going to do that, great. Build for yourself cities for your small children and pens for your flock. And what has come from your mouth shall you do. What's the difference of the two? So what happens is they said they're going to build pens for the animals and cities for the small children. And Moshe said, your priorities are not what they should be. First, you should say that you'll build cities for your small children and then pens for the livestock. He was giving, even in his way of hearing what they were saying, he was tweaking them a little bit and said, that's not the way you do it. That's not the way you talk. So this is a very important idea. Moshe says kids first. No one on the deathbed said, oh, I should have spent more time at the office. There's a joke that someone said recently. The guy's on his deathbed and everyone and the family came to see him and say goodbye. And he says, is everybody here? Yes. All my kids? Yes. All my grandkids? Yes. So why did someone leave the light on in the kitchen? Why is that funny? Because that's not what a person's going to say. You're right. You know? So 2 more points, and then we have to do a little bit of the second parsha. We'll do at least a little bit of that. But I just want to mention that the priority has to be the kids. The priority has to be what's best for them. Is there a place for them to have a yeshiva? I know a man who was very poor, and the government post World War II was offering to give farms. They needed farmers in New Jersey. The government was offering for a relatively inexpensive amount of money that people would be farmers. And he said, I'll take it. They said, great, we'll give it to you for a very relatively inexpensive amount of money. He's going to borrow the money to have it. So wait a second, is there a school there, a Jewish school? Is there shuls? He says, no. He says, then I can't take it. So he was in misery for a year till finally a shul opened up, a synagogue opened up at a rabbi, and a Jewish school was there. Said, okay, now we can do it. And then he moved in and became an egg farmer. This very prominent rabbi in the community was, when he was growing up, he was helping his parents with the egg farm. Okay, but the priority is the kids. What are the kids going to do? What do you mean? It's expensive, tuition? True, but Jewish education is key, and living in the community is key. Just to conclude this Matos, at the end of the portion it says, verse 42 on page 917, Novach went and occupied Kenath and her suburbs, and he called it Novach after his name. What does that mean? What did he do? What?
Where's Kenna?
I don't know. It's So what did Novach do? I'll say it again.
He named it after himself.
He named the place after himself.
The
So Rav Samson Hirsch writes very beautifully. He says, does this perhaps express a slight reprehension of such procedure to found a memorial in bricks and stone to immortalize oneself, an earthly immortalization, which the Jew should seek and solely through the great deeds of spiritual and moral faithfulness? In other words, that it's saying that it's letting us know how bad that idea is, because it didn't last. You don't memorialize yourself by brick and stone. There was a school in the neighborhood, a Catholic school called the Walter Murphy High School. Walter Murphy was a Christian man who paid a lot of money, and the condition that the school would be used would be that it could never be sold to Jews. And unfortunately, the Catholic Church had some problems with having to pay lots of money for abuses that some of the people did, and they sold it. And they sold that church to the school called Orliyahu, which is on Third. And it doesn't say the Walter Murphy High School anymore. Now it's Orliyahu, a very beautiful day school for young boys and girls. So he tried to immortalize himself with this high school, but it didn't work. All right, let's talk at least a little bit about Masey. Masey deals with the travels of the Jewish people. Again, as I mentioned, it's the final portion of Chumash Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, and the first words are Eile Masey B'nei Yisrael. These are the travels of the Jewish people. Now, interestingly enough, the Jewish people had 4 exiles. The exiles that the Jewish people had would be the Galus Bavel, the Babylonian exile. What happened during the Babylonian exile? First temple destroyed. Parasumadai, Persia and Media. That's the Persian exile. That's the Purim story. Yavan, Greece, is the Hanukkah story, and then the current exile win is Galus Edom, the Edomite. That's the second temple was destroyed, and Western civilization coming from Rome, descendants of Esau. So interestingly enough, the first words say Eile Masey B'nei Yisrael. These are the travels of the Jewish people. Aleph stands for Edom. Masey is Paras Modai. B'nei, the Bay stands for Bavel, Babylon, and Yisrael, the first letter is Yavan. So we have the travels of the Jewish people implied in the opening verse. The first letters of it spell out the 4 exiles that the Jewish people would have. Pretty powerful stuff. So the Jewish people traveled had 42 stops, and this was a loving kindness of the Almighty that Hashem didn't. It was 40 years, but they were able to stay in certain places long enough, and I want to just conclude with 2 points. We're all travelers, and I don't mean going on vacation. I'm talking about different things in life bring us to different places. Somebody once came to JLE because they got a flyer in the mail, not addressed to them. The person who had lived there before had come to JLE, and the person moved, and then this person got the flyer addressed to the old guy, and they say, hey, this class in Judaism, I'd like to come. So we're all travelers, and we have to understand that Hashem is the one who leads us, and we have to be smart enough to grab the opportunities, to use the opportunities to be here, to hopefully go to the right place and not go to the wrong place. Interestingly enough, one of the things it talks about in the travels is the cities of the Levites. The Levites were the only tribe that didn't have their own land, but they did have cities with land surrounding the city, and including in that were the cities of refuge. The cities of refuge were if somebody killed someone inadvertently, they would have to go and go to that city to be protected. And it's a longer story there. They had to stay there till the Kohen Gadol passed away. Otherwise, if they went out, they could be killed by a relative. And now, if a person killed someone unintentionally, it's only if he had some responsibility. The classic example is, imagine a person had an axe that had a loose head, and he was using it to chop it. And when he's chopping wood in the forest, the axe flies off and kills somebody. So there's a certain amount of liability that this person has because he should have been careful to fix it and make sure nobody's there. So he has to go to this place, and the Kohen Gadol dies. What does that have to do with it? Because the Kohen Gadol should pray for a generation that no one should be killed. But I want to conclude with just an interesting thing. In the land of Israel, when the temple was up, there were no signs for where Jerusalem was, but there were many signs for where the cities of refuge were. And the question is, why? And the answer is because Jerusalem, we want people to talk about it. Excuse me, I'm trying to head to Jerusalem. Where is it? Oh, come, we're going together. Let's go. We'll go together. I'm heading that way. The cities of refuge, we don't want the conversation to be that way. Go where you need to go. There was a show a few years ago on Netflix called 13 Reasons Why. Although Netflix executives remain unconvinced of any correlation between a rise in teen suicides and 13 Reasons Why, there was a growing sentiment that the show's graphic wrist-slitting scenes need to be removed. I repeat that. There was pressure that the graphic wrist-slitting scenes need to be removed because it caused kids to do more suicide. What we're exposed to and what we hear about makes it more easy for us to do. So therefore, the signs about the cities of refuge, when someone kills someone, don't talk about it. There's a sign there, just go. Jerusalem, talk about that. What we talk about, what we focus on is really what becomes the reality. And what we don't talk about, it becomes, I once had a meeting with the rabbis in the community here about gambling. And one of the guys said that whenever a new casino opens up in an area that didn't have gambling, there's a tremendous increase in people that are dealing with gambling issues. So I asked him, is it because now there's an availability to gamble? And he says it's partially that, but partially just the opposite. It brings out the nature. Maybe a person would gamble if they had, but if they didn't have it nearby, they wouldn't. And now with the online gambling, it's become its own problem. So what's interesting is that he was saying that, yes, sometimes casinos attract gamblers to the casinos, but it also brings out the gambling in the people who normally wouldn't be gambling, which I thought was very interesting. So it fits in nicely with this parsha. So take a very look at the very end on page 934. It says, right under after the last verse is read, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek. The last person called up. The entire congregation stands up. And we say, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek. May we be strong and may be strength. Be strong, and may we be strengthened so that we can accomplish and finish many other books. Amen. All right. Any questions or thoughts? Yes.
Oh, their phone call passed away. And
When who?
When the
The Kohen Gadol passes away. Yes.
And they leave the refuge place.
Yes.
Does that mean that the family, if they're still alive, can they kill them?
No. That means he's free. He's done. Did everyone sign in, by the way? If you didn't sign in, please come up and sign in. Yes, question.
First of all, thank you for going over the Shilishi and.
You're very welcome.
And I'm gonna go over Torah, reading.
That's why we have to get you to come here because we announce the page numbers. Go ahead, next. No guilt. Go ahead.
If I'm not making a mistake, they divided part of Shishi, the fifth one, and gave the area to different people. And also
Oh, you're talking about sometimes on a regular week. Yes, sometimes some shuls will give more aliyahs than the 7 aliyahs, because they want to honor more people, so sometimes they'll find a place that they could divide it up more to give more, call more people up. No, it depends on which aliyah, it depends, it's just tied to where there's a natural break in the action to do it. It doesn't have to be anyone in particular. Normally, we do a minimum of 7, and some shuls will add more to give more people honors, they'll add more people to fall up.
And I don't know where it's.
You should ask somebody, where did they stop? What did I do? What happened there? They should put up a stop sign.
Thank
You're very welcome. What? Some have the custom never to add extras. What?
To give people.
Oh, you want to do that?
I've seen that actually. They'll stick to 7, but then they'll start another name.
That I've never seen, but generally, like I said, we only call up 7. But sometimes, let's say, sometimes it'll be if there's, let's say, a bar mitzvah or something. Thank you. What? If we add, we'll only add 1 by the maftir. We'll stop by shavi by maftir. We'll give 1 extra leave, but I don't usually allow extra leaves. No, well, we don't have that many people anyway. But even if we did, if there's a big crowd, only on unusual circumstances would I add 1. That depends on the custom of the synagogue. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. You're very
Rabbi?
welcome. Yes, tonight's 7 o'clock class here on the laws and customs of the previous 9 days. It's on Zoom as well. Also, there's our flyers for the raffle, which we hope everybody participates and gets other people to participate. Yes, question.
I just want to say tomorrow night at 7:30, there's a talk at Cedar Sinai, from Rav Asher Weiss
Russia Weiss, yes, that's correct.
at 7:30 in the Harvey Morse Auditorium.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any other questions, thoughts, comments? In Cedar Sinai, in the auditorium there.
How long could the
Tonight's class?
Yeah.
It's only 3 hours.
Huh?
No, I'm.
I know what Rabbi said.
No, it'll be, no, probably a little less than an hour, I'm guessing. You don't want to sit too long.
Thank
You can stand, you're welcome, take care. Welcome, take care. David, Shmuel, Steph, Elisheva, Joseph, Michelle, take care.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
You're welcome, bye-bye.